Welcome back to another episode of the Strive for 25 podcast. I've got an amazing guest on today, Jamie Lima, and we're going to be digging into a topic that we haven't really touched on this show. And this is something that's going to be inevitable for probably 30 to 80% of the population, depending on the metrics you look at. So, talking a little bit about divorce planning and wealth building and all that kind of combined into one conversation. But, Jamie, thank you so much for making time out today.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, okay, I threw a range out there, 30 to 80%, because I'm just guessing. There's probably different ways you can track the data, but I'm going to start with that. So divorce, it happens, right? How would you kind of throw some data out there for what the likelihood or possibilities are? If you get divorced one time and you get remarried, there's probably different metrics. And if it's just one time, like what's the data say?
Yeah, great question. I think the statistic everyone knows is 50%, right? 50% is usually the rule of thumb that 50% of divorces of marriages are going to end in divorce. It gets even worse if you move on to a second marriage. And I'm a risk taker, so I ended up, did finalize my divorce years ago, but I didn't end up getting remarried about 5 years ago. It's an amazing experience so far, but a little bit of a risk taker because knowing that statistic, you think it would have given me an opportunity to pause there and rethink that, but it is what it is. Yeah, so 50% of divorces, first marriages end in divorce, and then 70% of second marriages end in divorce. So it's pretty challenging statistics either way around.
And so kind of bringing this back to what you do, right? I mean, you're in the financial wealth planning industry. How long have you been doing it, first off?
I've been a financial planner for almost 20 years, but my focus on divorce, I've really just been focusing on the last year or so. And I probably should have done it the first 20 years of my career because it is very fulfilling work and very challenging, but very fulfilling. And there's a lot of need for it. So I'm excited to roll up my sleeves and start working in this area.
So what would you say? What's the number one thing that stands out that you mentioned the need? What is the biggest pain point or struggle that goes into this process with working with someone's financial situation?
I think there are a couple. The first is we work with a lot of stay-at-home moms, and not to be sexist or anything, but we do work with about 90+% of the clients that we work with are stay-at-home moms. And the challenge that they run into is that they never really had, well, they didn't work outside the home. They've worked inside the home, but a lot of them are never really involved in some of the financial decision making that goes on in a household, right? Like managing budgets and managing cash flow and understanding where how to invest, things of that nature. Like a lot of them have never met with a financial planner ever, and so that can be a little bit of a challenge. And then the second thing is that people don't really understand the impact that taxes have on some of the decisions that they have to make. And we spend a lot of time really trying to educate people on, like if you do this thing, then you have to understand the tax consequences of whatever that thing is. Um, so there are a lot of landmines, so to speak, that people step in relative to the financial aspect of divorce, but those seem to be the two biggest ones.
Okay, so just to say it out loud again. So you mentioned a lot of the people that come through your lane end up being stay-at-home moms that have not been in the traditional workforce job, W-2, run a business, whatever. And then the second part, tax implications. Is that what you're saying? Is it two things?
Exactly.
Okay. So the first part of it, right? I've been in the mortgage business since '06, and I have kids that are now two boys that are now 4 years old. And my wife and I both work. She's a counselor, and you do the job, right? But to be able to get ahead and try to be able to get traction and build, because I'm in a 100% sales commission type of world, to build, you have to be able to work on the business at some point in time. And a lot of times that's outside normal business hours. And so like your typical entrepreneur building a business, like you have to work on the business as well as,
In
doing
the
the
business.
job. And that just
Yeah,
takes time.
100%.
And when you're running a household together as a couple, like all the things I want to do are either early in the morning or late at night. Like there's just not enough time in the day to get all the things you want to do done. Now, at the same time, like my wife is working right now, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So I could just imagine like, what's the most dollar productive type of thing that somebody can be doing. And when you start doing the math on those things, like, okay, I'm going to hire people to do, the lawn, the this, the that, like the chores, whatever. Like you get to a certain point as your career grows, you earn more income that like your time is better spent quote unquote better spent dollar productive wise on doing XYZ activities, which means maybe the spouse doesn't have to work. And then you have this gap that builds between roles, earn income, take care of the household. And like, you can't do both. It's very challenging to be able to do both if you want to go all in on either one of those. So like that's like my quick perception from my own seat of what happens. And it's like no role is more important than the other. It's just different choices. But then at the same time, when you're kind of resetting, you have a major gap.
Major gap. And I totally understand that was exactly how it was in my first marriage, right? We agreed that we have 3 kids together, and we agreed that she was going to be, a stay-at-home mom and finish her education and so on. And then once my youngest got to be a little bit older, she would go back to the workforce and then, contribute to the family in not only in a homemaking perspective, but also in a financial perspective. So, and a lot of families do that. What I see tend to happen though is there tends to be one financial decision maker in the house. And again, not to be sexist, but in the scenario we're talking about, it's usually the husband, right? And this even goes back to predating my divorce financial planning days when I would work in traditional, and I still do traditional retirement planning, wealth management, that type of thing in my day-to-day job as well. And in that role, for the most part, it's, you're meeting with the husband, who's the decision maker, and he's determining how they're going to invest and what their goals are, and how they're going to save for retirement, and so on. That's just it's what I've seen historically over my almost 20-year career doing this. So I guess the lesson for your listeners is, if that's you, and this is even a conversation I had with my stepdaughter and my daughter the other day. They're certainly not ready for marriage. Mom and dad are certainly not ready for them to be married, but when it comes time, I want them to make sure that they're involved in those conversations in some way, shape, or form, because it can be severely detrimental to their financial well-being in the future should something tragic happen, like a divorce. So those that are listening right now, if that's you and you're not the part of the decision-making team, so to speak, and you're just kind of along for the ride, you're doing yourself a disservice by not participating.
So you mentioned a couple of those things, how to invest, some goals, saving for retirement. And those are, they're tangible, but they're also intangible in terms of like, what does it actually mean to be having a goal for retirement or saving for retirement? And that's an education. It's a process, not a one-time thing. And like you mentioned, talking to your daughter and your stepdaughter, exposing them to the information now so that when they hear it again and hear it again and hear it again, it starts to make more sense over time. When you say save for retirement, what's one thing that you would say would be important for someone to have a better understanding or context to what that actually means, and go into it from a day-to-day standpoint for somebody?
Well, I think you have to start with the end in mind, right? And that's the one thing I try to teach, not only our kids, but the clients that we work with. What do you want the end result to look like? And figure out what the steps you need to back into to be able to the steps you need to take to be able to get there. Right. I'm sure you deal with this on the real estate side, right? You have people that are trying to, build a real estate empire, or they're, try to leverage real estate as far, to build wealth and so on. Well, if you don't understand where you want to be and how many properties do you want to have in your portfolio, where do you want them to be? Do you want to rent them? Do you want to Airbnb them? What do you want to do? If you don't have, and if you're just kind of, let me buy a property and see what happens, there's a high probability you're going to fail if you don't understand where you're going. And that's the thing we try to do with everybody. And I always try to, when we have our first conversation about divorce financial planning, the very first exercise I take people through it's basically a vision exercise. Day one of your newfound single life, when this is all, the dust is settled and it's congratulations, you're divorced. What do you want your world to look like? Are the kids staying in the house? Or are they going to the same schools? Or are you guys you're gonna move somewhere? You have to start with the end in mind. And again, retirement planning is no different, and traditional wealth management is no different. If you want to retire at the age of 55 because you want to be able to do other things with your life, that's great. What are the steps that you need to take to be able to get there? And that's where a financial planner like myself can help people figure that all out.
So there's a lot that I want to be able to dig into. We mentioned the tax stuff, the vision part, what do we want it to look like? And then also kind of, some steps to be able to get there for somebody. Do you have maybe an example of somebody that you can loosely generally talk about? Kind of, okay, they retired, they didn't have a job recently and now they've got assets to be able to figure out, and okay, I guess the questions that come to mind for me is like, okay, how am I going to pay the bills? How long is that
Mhm.
money going to last? What else do I need to be doing along the way to be able to prepare for whatever else is coming? Maybe it's get back on the workforce or whatever. Like, do you have an example you can share?
What we see happen a lot is exactly what you just outlined, right? And we'll use an example because again, 90+% of the people that we work with are women and are trying to get themselves back into the workforce and be able to support themselves. So a lot of times what we'll do, we go through what does the vision look like, and how do you want to get, what was it going to take to get you there, and so on. We go through that traditional financial planning exercise, but there are different strategies we can employ. One of which we do a lot is in what's called a step down strategy. So let's say you have a husband and wife, and the husband's the major wage earner, and he's going to have to support her by way of child support and alimony. Over time, what we can do is we can create a strategy where we basically have the alimony step down over time, where let's say, just for example, we have $3,000 a month in alimony for the first year, then it goes down to 2,500, then 2,000, and then so on and so forth, until basically the husband he's not paying any more alimony. Why that works and why that's a good strategy is for a couple of different reasons. One being, marriages of long term, I'm in the state of California. In the state of California, it's anything over 10 years. In some cases, you're entitled to lifetime alimony amounts, right? Lifetime, which is a long period of time. As the alimony payer myself, in my own situation, I understand how daunting that can be as the person that has to have that responsibility for a very long period of time. So by shrinking that period of time, maybe having that person pay a little bit higher alimony amount up front that gradually reduces over time, that allows him to be in a position where he's like, okay, I understand there's some light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to suck for the first couple of years, but over time that number is going to go down. And on the other side of the equation, the wife, in this case, she knows that she has a little more runway now, where she says, okay, I have 3 or 5 years now where I can go back and finish my education, or I can get additional certifications. I can make sure the kids are a little bit older now and they're a little more self-sufficient themselves, and the costs are a little bit lower, so on and so forth. There's a lot of benefits of doing that type of strategy. We do that a lot for that particular reason, because alimony is meant to be a bridge. It's not meant to be something that is a forever thing. And by using this type of strategy, we can usually make both sides come together a lot quicker, right? So they spend less money in the courts and battling things out, and spend less time on attorney fees too, trying to figure it all out.
Okay, so you're kind of talking a little bit about I don't want to say negotiations, but like the inner workings of like coming to agreements
Mm-hmm.
between, two parties. So are you saying that you guys are part of that or do mediation? Like, can you explain that part of what you do?
Absolutely, all of it. So I prefer to come in at what's called in the role that's called a financial advocate. I prefer to be an advocate for my clients versus trying to get in the middle of a husband and wife trying to duke it out in the courtroom. There are CDFAs, certified divorce financial analysts like myself, that choose to do financial neutral work and some mediation work. I have not. I like the advocate work. But where we're involved is in pretty much every aspect of the divorce process, right? Like, I tell people all the time, I should be the first phone call, because at least I can, if I'm the first phone call, then I can let you know, based on your case and how complex or not complex it is, whether you even need an attorney. Because there are a lot of people out there that the first phone call they make is to an attorney who's going to take a retainer and bill you at every possible opportunity, and sometimes you don't even need it. What I've seen historically, with a little bit of help from someone like myself and a good divorce coach, because there are a lot of divorce coaches out there that will help you navigate the court system and the divorce process for a fraction of the cost an attorney's going to charge, and allow you to get to the end. You get the same result and you keep more money in your pocket. So, and I made that mistake myself when I decided I was going to get a divorce back in 2016. The first phone call I made was to divorce attorneys in my area, because I just figured that should be my first call. Now that I'm living, breathing, and involved in this environment, in this process, I realized that I probably didn't even need to do that. I probably could have made some better decisions there, but we'll do everything from helping them figure out the alimony calculations to asset division. You mentioned taxes. We'll help them decide, help them navigate the tax decisions that they have to make. And I can come in as an expert witness. So if I ever get, if somebody gets called into court and needs assistance arguing their case, I can do that at work as well. So there's a lot of different facets we're involved in the divorce process.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up the tax part of it.
Okay.
So, what's an example where you see that part come in the most? Is it like income taxes? Is it, selling a property or selling something? Now you've got capital gains. Like, where do you see the most come in?
Yeah, and the great question, and I think especially if a lot of your listeners are involved in the real estate realm, the after-tax evaluations of things is huge. Helping people understand when all is said and done, when the dust is settled on the asset division and the tax man gets his piece, what is left over? Because a lot of people think that, well, okay, Joel, you have $500,000 in your 401k. I have $500,000 in equity in the house. Let me keep the house and you keep your 401k and we'll be even Steven. And not so much, right? Because we all understand that especially with the listeners you have, I'm sure they recognize that the property is probably a better deal, because if when you go to sell that later, you get your capital gains exemptions and you get all the other tax deductions along the way for that, right? The tax write-offs and so on every year that you own that property. Whereas Joel, if you kept your 401k, every time you take a dime out of that account, sometime before or after the age of 59 and a half, you're paying taxes on that money at ordinary income tax rates. So that $500,000 account might only really be worth 350 after tax, whereas the house is worth much more. Right? So we have to walk people through that because they don't teach you this stuff in school. Right? And they just don't. And we have to just walk them through that. Like, you recognize that if you settle for this thing, this is how it's going to, these are the pros and cons of doing that.
So, flipping the script, let's say you have somebody that goes all into court, attorneys, all this stuff. And then now you have those processes evaluating assets and also debts, credit cards, loans, mortgages, car payments, a whole picture, right? How would you describe the difference in terms of outcomes or process when you have that, official type of stuff looking at analyzing versus, say, a consultant like yourself or advocate?
I think if you're going to leave anything up to the court system in and of itself, you're asking for trouble. And I say that with all due respect to the court system, the attorneys that are out there, the attorneys that are listening. I have an attorney on my wealth management team. We are great friends. One of my best friends is a family law attorney. And so I have a great deal of respect for the work that they do. And it is a tough job. But we have to remember that the court system in and of itself is a court designed to prosecute criminals.
Yep.
And we are not, all you're simply doing in the event of a divorce, you're basically decoupling a business transaction. There's no criminal intent. There's no criminal, there were no criminals involved, but we still take people through the same process that we take people that are on, that have done really devastating things to people, right? And it's just not, and the courts just don't care in the long run. What I know the courts care about, in my experience, the courts care about the kids. If there are kids involved, they don't care who had an affair with who, or who's a narcissist and who's not, and all these things. I hear this stuff all the time. They care about the safety and the well-being of the children, which is awesome. But they don't really care whether or not you're going to save on taxes. They don't care whether or not there's an emotional attachment to the house and you want to keep it for whatever reason. They just don't care. They care. The courts care about the law. And at the end of the day, that's it. So where we come in is to help you navigate the emotional side of things think through things pragmatically, so it's an EQ and IQ experience, and helping you really just try to get to the end of this thing where you can look back and go, wow, that was tough. And nobody wins in these situations. So it's not really a win, so to speak, but to be able to get people through and feel like they can move on with the next phase of their life and hold their head up high when they made some good financial decisions.
So taxes, dividing assets, you mentioned EQ and IQ as well. And like going into the process, all these emotions that are happening, all the stuff has happened in the past and it's coming out. Do you have any tips or tricks for somebody on either side going through the process in terms of perspective or whatnot?
Absolutely. And it kind of ties into my one of the comments I made just a second ago, which is it is a business transaction, right? I mean, think about it. You meet someone, you decide that you want to become a partner with them. You sign a document, you get a license to be able to marry. You sign a document stating that you're married. It's an agreement. It's a legal agreement, right? And now you're having to uncouple that legally. If we start letting the emotions get involved in all the decisions that we have to make, we're going to make some bad decisions along the way. There's no doubt about it. So what I tell people all the time is, like, if I were talking to you, one of my clients, like, you are now the CEO of Joel Incorporated. I want you to make sure that every conversation you have is very brief and very to the point, just like you would with an employee that you're ready to terminate. You walk them into your office. Thank you for all the time, energy, and effort that you spent with us. We appreciate the work that you've done. We're no longer going to need your services anymore. We wish you all the best. Right? I mean, that's how it works. It's exactly the way that we should be handling our divorce. Once you say you drop the dreaded D word, it is game on, and you are now the CEO of your personal empire. And the other thing I would say, because if we start letting emotions get involved, the one thing I tell people all the time is you want to make sure that every text message, phone call, voicemail, email, anything that has been documented, pretend it's going to be presented in the court of law, because it probably will one day if it gets contentious. So you want to make sure that your emails and text messages and everything else is very straight to the point. And just like a CEO who is terminating an employee relationship would communicate.
Okay. So somebody going through this process, you mentioned vision. Let's say you got somebody middle of their journey, mid 40s, got time to get back in the workforce, alimony, child support, maybe you do the step down method, like you mentioned. What's an example of someone saying, hey, this is how I want this to look like, for the ultimate vision, the goal?
I think a lot of people, as they're going through this exercise, they're really focused on, what tomorrow looks like. Can I survive? Can I survive today? Can I just get to tomorrow? And I recognize that, because most people that are going through this are in a survival mode, so to speak. One of the exercises that we take people through in our traditional retirement planning strategy sessions is what we call the SMART framework, right? So related to decision making. So we want to make sure we spend time with them to make sure that the goals and objectives are specific, right? They're measurable, they're aligned, they're realistic, and they're time bound. And if you spend some time doing that, and you can do this with anything in your life, whether it's related to your divorce or your future retirement planning or the goals that you have for your family, if you're a business owner, whatever. I did this with my own business, right? Like, what do I want this to look like 3, 5, 10 years from now? And if you sit down and you take yourself through this exercise, and I'll share with you what this all looks like. So you start with a goal in mind. I want to buy a house in Miami in 5 years. Most people are like, wow, that's a really cool goal. Okay, well, what color is the house? How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms? Is it on an acre? Is it on a half acre? Is it in Biscayne Bay? Is it in Tampa? Where is it? I want to be very specific about it, right? And I want to make sure it's measurable. So once I have a specific goal in mind, very detailed goal, I want to make sure I can measure my progress towards it. Okay, well, it's going to cost me X dollars to buy that house. I have Y dollars saved up. what is my gap, and how much do I need to save every month over the course of the next however much time, 3 years, call it. How much money do I have to save, and at what interest rate, or what, if I can invest in that money, what kind of rate of return do I need to get in order to make sure that I can achieve this goal? So now I have a way to measure my progress towards that goal. Is it aligned? If I want to live in Florida and my wife wants to live in Ohio, we're probably not aligned. So we need to work through that too, right? So you want to make sure that's aligned with all key stakeholders. Is it realistic? I think it's pretty realistic that, I could, we have a property, so I could sell my property and I could probably buy another one in Florida the next 3 to 5 years, and so on. But maybe somebody has a goal, and I've seen this happen before. Like, well, I want to pay off my student loans. I have $100,000 worth of student loans. I want to pay them off in the next 2 years, and I make $2,000 a month. It's like, okay, really? Like, is it realistic? Right? And then the time bound component of it is we want to make sure that we have a specific time frame in which we're going to be able to achieve this goal, 3 to 5 years, whatever the number is. And I think if people could take some time to go through that exercise themselves, again, whether going through divorce or building a business or just in their day-to-day lives, it'll make the goal setting process much easier, and you'll have a higher probability of actually achieving that goal. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, it's helpful for me personally to be able to kind of walk through an example, a dummy example like that. I have another question for you about just retirement. All kinds of data out there about, hey, 401ks, real estate, is the money going to be enough to survive? All this stuff. I guess one question you may or may not know: what percentage of your client base is in that kind of 60 and above? That's kind of really closer to thinking about that type of stuff.
We only work with about 20% of our clients in that space.
Okay.
Yeah. The majority of the clients that we work with, because I do have Allegiant Divorce Solutions where I do my traditional financial planning for divorce, but our traditional financial planning, wealth management, investment management business we do that work under a company that I also run called Woodson Wealth Management. And under Woodson, we are primarily focused on those age, call it 30 to 50, 35 to 55.
Mm-hmm.
I call them the mid-career professionals, dudes like me and you who have responsibilities outside of the workplace. Like me personally, we were dealing with some family members that are sick, so we have that concern. We have my wife and I have 5 kids between the two of us, 3 in college, so we have that concern. We have our day-to-day jobs that's a concern for us. We have all these spinning plates. We are the demographic, the primary client that we work with at Woodson. We do have a few people that are on the older end of the spectrum they're either transitioning into retirement or already in retirement, but it's a much smaller percentage than some other firms that are out there.
So kind of taking that small percentage, not to give away anybody's personal information, but how many of that subset would you say are, comfortable of the amount that they have put away at that point for, not worrying about lasting long enough versus not being confident about the number?
I think a good majority of them are pretty comfortable. I'm nobody special. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we do a pretty good job preparing people for that phase of life. Yeah, like I said, I've been doing this almost 20 years. The first 15 years or so of my career, I did work with retirees for the most part. They were the typical, 60, 65 plus retiree. And you learn some really good skills in income generation and asset protection and so on in that 15 years. So we've been able to transition a lot of that, those same skills over to the clients that we work with that are on the older end of the spectrum for us. But I think they're pretty good. I mean, we have 1 or 2 families that are, there could be some concerns about health that may creep up, that may put us in a little bit of a bind where we have to be really cautious. But the one thing I will say, and I hope this also speaks to your listeners as well, the happiest and wealthiest people that I've worked with over the course of the last 20 years in my career doing this are those that have very diversified sources of income.
That's kind of why I'm asking these questions. Is at the end of the day, if I'm 25, if I'm 35, shit, like, is what I'm doing enough? Because again, time obviously compounds. You buy assets over time; they work for you. But like at the end of the day, like it's harder and harder to put cash away to invest as cost of living has gone up. So it's like, what do you need to be doing to get ahead? So
Yeah.
You mentioned diversified income sources, streams. What do you mean? Like, what's an example? What are you talking about?
If you had all of your money in your 401k, like here's an example. My wife is a nurse. She's been a nurse for 23 years now. All the money that she's saved personally for herself for retirement is in her 401k, 403b, right? She works for a nonprofit. That is one asset that she has. A lot of the people that I've worked with, a couple now and then some that I've worked with in the past, they only have that one asset. And if that luckily for my wife and I would I have my 401k, we have some real estate assets, we have businesses and so on, so we have multiple streams of income coming in, and that will probably continue on into retirement. So I have many more levers to pull, so to speak, where I could sell a business if I had to, or we could sell a property if we had to, or we could rent. We have an Airbnb that's been very successful, that's been started off as a little side gig and turned into something that it's an actual business for us. So we have that stream of income. Now, if that wasn't the case, you can imagine how challenging it would be. Let's fast forward 20 years when we're both ready to retire or into retirement. If we only had her 401k or 403b to go to, it doesn't give us very many sources of income. She'd have that in Social Security, right? But now we're in a position where we have her 401k, my 401k, we have some business income, we have residual income coming from the real estate property, we have other assets to sell. When you have more levers to pull in retirement, you have much more flexibility. You can control your taxes. And then you also have a lot more flexibility because let's say in 1 year, we go into another recession and the market's down 20%. And you're like, well, I don't really want to pull money out. I don't want to sell any assets in my 401k to generate income because the market's down, right? Because we want to buy low and sell high, not sell low and buy high. If you have the opportunity to get sources of income in other areas, then you could forego taking money out of the 401k that year. Right? And you can play that game a little bit. So you're trying to make sure you maintain some flexibility. You're protecting yourself from the markets. You're protecting yourself from inflation. And you want to make sure you put yourself in a position where you're not going to outlive your money either. So you have to, if you can do all those things versus just putting all your eggs in one basket, i.e. your 401k at work, high probability you're going to be much more successful in the long run.
So let's say you had somebody to come your way that had 500K in a 401k.
Mm-hmm.
And, let's just say it's a household. Doesn't matter who it is, how many people that's the household. And that's really all they got. And they own a house, like the primary residence, but like, that's it. And there's equity growing. And then they said, hey, you know what? I want to, what should I do? And I'm imagining you saying, hey, well, you got, one goal maybe to think about would be to diversify some stuff, think about some other options, maybe a business or real estate or whatever. At that point in time, like, how does that conversation go through? And then, like, say somebody wanted to do real estate, okay, well, then what do they do to be able to be prepared? Well, how does that conversation work out in terms of, because you're going to need to have cash to be able to invest. So then how do you, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to, you can only do so much, right? Somebody comes to us, and this happens a lot, where we have people, and I'm actually working on a case right now where I have a husband and wife that want to move to Minnesota next year. And right now, the only assets they have are their workplace 401k plans and a little bit of emergency cash that they've saved. They're renting too, so it's not even like they're going to be able to sell their property and generate some cash and be able to put that down, or put that towards another property in another state. So you're working with a finite amount of money and a finite amount of options. So you have to figure out how to maximize them, right? So we're working on reducing the budget, saving some extra cash, and figuring out a way to, how do we pad this emergency reserve or the cash cushion that they have so they can't afford to be able to go, the next year or so, be able to go buy that property. There is no magic bullet, right? And that's the kind of the conversation that I have to have with them tomorrow is you could, I guess technically you could buy this real estate in your retirement account because there are companies out there that will help you do that. Is that the most advisable thing? Probably not. So we have to figure out, like, you have all these competing priorities. What do we want to tackle first? Right. So that would be how we would present it is like, okay, unless there's a money tree in the backyard or some, tin cans in the backyard with a bunch of cash in them, how do you plan on making this happen? Because I mean, we can, and maybe it goes back to the smart goal setting, that the smart framework for goal setting that we have. And It's like, okay, well, maybe we can't do it next year, but can we do it in 3? Can we do it in 5? And what do we need to do to be able to get there? So that'll be a conversation that I have with them tomorrow. But again, there's no magic bullet.
I love that, because I mean, I talk to people in my world that they want results tomorrow. They want XYZ, quickly. And that's not everybody, but that's definitely common. And it's just natural, right? Because we're animals at heart, right? Our evolution, we expect to be able to hunt and kill. You go back 20,000 years on the safari, right? Like that, we're built that way, wired that way to want something, immediately.
Yeah.
Before I forget to bring it up, where can people find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you if they want to reach out with questions and whatnot?
I think just going through the website is ideal. If they go to visit the website, my cell phone is on the website. We work with a very small number of people, so I'm happy to give my cell phone out so people can contact me if they have questions. That's allegiantds.com. They can, I'm pretty sure you're going to put it in the show notes, so I don't need to spell it out. But if they just go to the website, allegiantds.com, that's my cell phone number's on there. They can set an appointment if they want to talk through some things. Everything's complimentary. We don't charge for our calls, and everything's confidential too. So if there are listeners out there that are contemplating dropping the D word to their spouse, all conversations are confidential. And like I said, I think calling me first is probably the best option versus picking up the phone and calling an attorney, because I can at least give my 2 cents and share with that person, like, yeah, maybe you should hire an attorney. And if you need help finding one, I can certainly help do that. But again, a lot of people can get through this process without having to go down that path.
And from a geography standpoint, are there any restrictions on people that you can help out with?
Yeah, we're all 50 states.
Okay.
All 50 states. Yeah, we don't do the traditional wealth management and investment management in the state of Louisiana, only simply because there are a lot of French laws that are involved there, and we are a highly regulated organization. And it would be a full-time job trying to abide by the laws of Louisiana. So we try not to take on anybody there, but all other 49 states are perfectly fine.
So, I mean, you personally going through, the divorce process yourself, is there something that stands out that you learned or are aware of now that you never even were aware of going into it?
The thing I learned the most over the course of the last couple of years is that there are more resources out there than you think. When I went through the divorce, again, all I did was I made the decision, interviewed a couple, picked up the phone, confirmed that I wanted to hire this one person, sent them my retainer, and I was done. I didn't really pay attention to all the other resources that are available. The Facebook groups, the people like me that are out there, the divorce coaches, all of these people that are out there that are there to help you navigate the emotions, the stress, all of it. I took it upon myself because, probably because I'm a dude and I'm like, I'll just handle this, and I'm in the financial services industries and I know my stuff. I could have used my resources better. I probably could have used the help of a divorce coach. I think I did a pretty good job on the financial aspect of things. I did make some mistakes, and don't get me wrong, but for the most part, I did a pretty good job. But just recognizing that there are resources out there, like we launched it's called Preparing Financially for Divorce, a divorce a Facebook group that we just launched just a couple of weeks ago, and we already have like 100 members. And even in that group, we're just trying to share information with one another and support each other. And so far, everybody's been really cool with one another and asking really good questions. Like, leverage those resources because they do exist. And I kind of just buried my head in the sand, and I wish I did.
The old adage of like, you don't know what you don't know, kind of a thing. You don't know which questions to be even asking if you don't have the right kind of experience. Whether it's the Facebook group or the website or connecting with you, I mean, do you guys have like a guide or an outline of like, hey, these are the important questions you need to be thinking about and asking?
Yeah, there are a bunch of on the website. There is a free resources page, and we don't ask for email addresses. It's not one of those free resources where give me all your information and then I'll give you whatever it is for free. But you can literally go to the website. There's a free resource tab at the very top, and I provide a list of important documents you're going to want to gather, to-do list, a checklist that you can use. There's 7 or 8 different documents that are on there. I'm drawing a blank on a couple of the others, but They're all the same documents that we provide our paying clients when they work with
Mhm.
us to help them keep them organized. And I put it out there for free. It's all available for anybody to download.
Okay. One more thing, kind of from
Yeah.
that hope perspective. Have you ever come across a group or a couple where like you go through the process and all of a sudden they realize that hey, maybe we can work it out, figure it out?
Just happened a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
Just happened a couple weeks ago. She called
Saying
me
there's
and
a
said,
chance.
"Yeah." So you're telling me there's a chance? She texted and we were able to. We sent her. I sent her back the what was left of her retainer, and we didn't do a lot of work, but we did some work for them, and it had a conversation with both of them. It was one of the very few times where you meet with both sides, both parties, so to speak, and there wasn't a lot of animosity, and they seemed pretty adamant about trying to work things out amicably if they were going to finalize things. But sounds like we've got a rekindled romance here.
I guess one more thing. Would you say that there's a common theme that is the root of that kind of just gap in terms of communication or relationship that widens? Like, what's a common theme that you see happen?
I'm seeing a lot of midlife crises. People get married. It's the white picket fence scenario. We're gonna have a couple kids, and everything's kumbaya, and everybody's getting it's amazing. The kids we're involved in the kids' lives, and we've got athletics, and we've got this thing going on and that thing going on, and the next thing you know, you're staring at each other, going, well, the kids don't want to have anything to do with us anymore because they all have jobs now, or they've got the car keys, and they're busy with their friends doing this, and it's just the two of us, right? And because of all that stuff getting in the way, people can people can slowly drift apart, right? And you try to keep it all together for the family unit, and then one day you're looking at each other going, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives? Because like that person that existed 18 years ago when little Johnny was a baby is I'm not the same person anymore. And so I see that happen a lot. So it's kind of the midlife crisis. Am I the same person that I was? What do I want for the next phase of my life? We unfortunately we have one of my loved ones is probably not going to make it too much longer, and my grandmother, who just will turn 92 next week, we share a birthday. I just went and said bye to her probably for the last time, and we're all mortal, right? And then you get to a point in your life where you realize, wow, I don't have much more life to live, right? Like I'm already halfway there, Joel. I'm going to be 46, man. And you want to make sure that, and so I see that happen a lot where people are like, it might be time to go our separate ways so we can be the people that we want to be for the next phase of our life. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. But that tends to be the theme.
Gotcha. No, no, thanks for sharing that. Kind of back to the business, and I keep asking more questions. What would you say is the ultimate vision goal as you kind of see things unfolding over the next few years?
For my business,
Yeah, yeah, for the business.
for the business, it's a great question. I feel like we'll probably add another associate or two to the team to continue to grow and scale. I've been able to bring on one gal who is a certified financial planner and also a certified divorce financial analyst as well. So she just started about 2 weeks ago, and she's going to be helping me absorb some of the workload that we have. Because, like you alluded to earlier, I run two businesses, so I spend a lot of time working in the business, but I also need time to work on the businesses, and she's going to help me be able to do that. And I think that's probably the we'll probably stay the course and do that. Maybe add another associate or two. As far as my wealth management practice goes, we'll probably add another advisor or two over the course of the next, maybe the next couple months, I think, and continue to help us grow and scale there. But I'm not looking to take over the world, man. I'm just trying to look to help as many people as I can along the way. And my biggest regret, frankly, like I kind of talked about earlier, I wish I would have done this 10 years ago, because I
Mhm.
probably could have helped so many more people navigate this very challenging process. But hindsight is 2020. I'm just glad that I have an opportunity to do it now. And for me personally, I think we're probably going to take the show on the road. I think my wife and I are gonna RV, maybe start RVing next year for a year or two and travel the country, and then try to find another place to settle down in this amazing country of ours. But I grew up in New England, and we've both grew up in New England, and we both moved from New England to California when we were relatively young, and didn't really see any other. We didn't really see any of the other country besides both coasts since we were kids. So, with the work we do, because we do work virtually and we work all across the country, it shouldn't be a problem as long as I have Wi-Fi. But that's probably what we'll do personally is
That's awesome.
take the show on the road, man. Go see some of these people face to face instead of just in this environment like we do
Yeah.
now.
I feel like with all the Zoom stuff, like there's a missing component of opportunity for people that really want to make an impact to be able to, like you
Yeah.
say, get on the road and get to people. Maybe this could be a conversation for next time, because it's something that I'm passionate about. The younger generation, people in their teens and 20s, is there enough education out there for, getting ahead financially, wealth building? Because things are different than they were 10 years ago, 50 years ago, in terms of what's being taught in high school and college and all the things. Like, what's one thing that, are showing or exposing to your kids that you think is probably something that other parents may need to be aware of?
Simply the power of compounding, right? And they don't. I guess they teach that aspect of investing in school and understanding how interest rates work and things like that. But I never. Nobody taught me. Nobody explained what a 401k is, or an IRA, or a Roth IRA, and they just didn't. They don't teach you this stuff in school, like I said earlier. And one of the things that we do with our kids when we give them once they start earning a wage, they get a reasonable job. We have a couple of people working in restaurants. We have one working in retail, and so while they're finishing up school, that we give them that first year where they get their paycheck and they can do whatever they want to do with it and they can have some fun. And then at year two, they have to put money away into a retirement account. And my wife and I, we match them for that first year to make sure that they get a reasonable amount put in there. But my stepson, he'll Venmo me money all the time, and he texts me like, buy more stocks or whatever. So we'll help him do that. They all have their first Roth IRA accounts, and it's a big deal starting that at 20 years old versus when I started at, I think the first time I really started putting money away in my 401k I was 25 or 26. Even that small 5 or 6 year period is going to make a huge difference in the long
Mm-hmm.
run. And it's giving him the exposure. He's learning how the markets work and how to trade and things like that. So for those parents that are out there listening, it doesn't, as long as your child has some earned income, even just a few $100, I would start socking away money now and let them reap those benefits later.
I love that. Yeah. Exposing them early doesn't have to be a lot of money. Just exposing them
No,
early has a
it's five.
massive.
Yeah, Brandon put $500 away in his account. We put $500 in. He's got $1,000 in there. And buy some S&P 500. Buy the S&P 500 ETF, and call it a day. And then every couple of weeks he sends me $100 here, $200. It's not a big deal. We're not. He's not going to be able to move mountains with it right now. But 50 years into the future, it's going to be worth some coin
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we have a lot more to catch up on down the road. But no, thank you so much for making time out today and sharing some stories and insights. And again, this is not a fun topic to necessarily be talking about, but it's good to be able to put it out there. And again, I know you're out there talking about this in other platforms as well. So thank you for that work and just having some free resources out there. I just think it's just so important. No paywalls. So thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Cool. See you, Jamie.
See ya.